Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce, and Matt Bishop, who is presently in Australia. We've had him on the stream a heaps before, but not for an awful long time. I'm dead excited, not only to be speaking to Matt, but also I'm excited to speak to you guys out there. I'm genuinely love these moments where we get together and hang out. And it seems like it's been ages since I've done a live. So hello, everybody. And hello, Matt. Thanks for coming on.
Hey JP, thanks for having me back. And I don't know actually if you saw in my comments, but today's my 1 year subscriber for your channel.
I
So,
did. Ledge.
pretty stoked about that as well, to be honest.
It's amazing, mate. I did see that, and thank you so much. It's yeah, amazing. And you know, you are, just to let people. Well, in fact, you give people a sense of who you are, because not everyone would have been members or subscribers or viewers when we were last together. So, what's your quick background?
Well, I'm human, male, English born, Australian raised, lived in Ukraine for over 10 years, married to Ukrainian woman, Ukrainian son. And yeah, I'm an engineer by trade. So I look
And
at things differently from philosophers.
you were in Kharkiv when the war started.
Yeah, yeah, and we did the running away bit, which we did very well, I must say. Yeah, I just saw Mark pop up then. Hi, Mark. Um, yeah, so
Yeah, so
10
you
years
got
living there, and
you and your family, you went out via Romania, got to
yeah,
Australia, and that's where you've kind of resettled back in
yeah,
your homeland, so to speak,
yeah,
with now your wife and son. And you had your father-in-law come out and visit you, who is
over
living
summer.
presently in Kharkiv, and he's
He's
gone
back
back.
in Kharkiv, yeah. Yep,
What
he's back there now.
what's it? What are his experiences?
Not great. And to answer Mr. Squiggle, technically electronic, but don't hold that against me. Um, not great. I was saying to you just before, we're on the phone to him the other day, and we hear the bang in the background, and he's like, oh, another one. It's another glide bomb coming in. So that's not good. But he's back there again. Doesn't want to move away. We give him those options, but of course, we know every day it could be the last time we talk to him.
Mm.
To put it bluntly.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
it's one of those things where Pierre sometimes reaches out to me and says, because he's got contacts in Kharkiv, saying, "Look, do you know what? It's so improved since the Kharkiv offensive started, and the US gave permission to strike into Belgorod Oblast, and the Ukrainians straight away took out those S-300, S-400 systems like that." And then ever since then, there have been no missiles flying into Kharkiv. But on the other hand, the Russians realize that they can still use the guided glide bombs. They can take off from those air bases inside Belgrade or close enough to the border and hammer places like Kharkiv with those bombs and still do an awful lot of damage. But just it still is an improvement from not having S-300s fly in there.
Yeah, it is actually a big improvement, and of course, since the artillery was pushed back 7 months, 9 months, whatever it is ago, Kharkiv's been a lot better place to live. But there was 200 days where Kharkiv was shelled every day, 200 plus days,
Yeah.
and then it moved on to the missiles when they couldn't hit it with artillery anymore, and Russia just wants to destroy. Just
Mm.
that's you start to wonder what's wrong with them.
Well,
You
see,
know.
this is a really good point, because I mentioned this morning with regard to Kherson in the south, that I was there and there's no military there, as far as I can work out. It really isn't like a military presence inside the city.
Mm,
And Russia have been consistently hitting that ever since they lost it. And the only rationale is they just want to do terrorism. They want to. They live by the, well, if I can't have it, you can't have it either ethos. And they are hammering the city and killing civilians, and purposefully. And that to
yeah.
me is just an overt war crime. But it's like, what is the rationale here, other than, well, it is the we can't have it so that you can't. So there's this kind of real sense of retribution, but also, like, if you are serious that these are your brothers, that this is your country, that Ukraine is part of the essence of Russia as a whole, then what are you doing destroying the very thing that you that are supposed to be yours? That's the same
Yeah,
as you guys bombing Yekaterinburg.
they're claiming that they want it. Excuse me. They're claiming that they want it, and then they're completely destroying it, and you're scratching your head wondering what the hell they're doing.
Yeah.
It just makes no sense. And they're gonna, if they took that, they then have to rebuild it. So
Yeah,
what the
yeah,
hell?
yeah. That is a really good point, actually. So the more you destroy, if you genuinely have intentions on controlling that area, it's a bit like Mariupol. Now they're in this predicament where they're having to spend lots of money on rebuilding Mariupol that they're destroyed, and they're not doing a particularly good job of that. But yeah, it makes you then wonder. Well, you clearly have no real intention of retaking Kherson. What are your actual goals? I mean, we try and second guess Russia's objectives in this war, and how as soon as they failed in having a 3-day special military operation, which was a genuine objective at the beginning, because garbage in, garbage out, and they had rubbish intelligence, it all went wrong. Then they had no fallback plan. So what is your objective? And they seem to be making it up on the hoof to some degree, but without any real notion of realistically taking back these large swathes of territory.
Well, yeah. Look, even if they manage to push it out, they're going to be up for hundreds of billions of rebuilding. So you you're just questioning what the heck is going on. Um, I do anyway. Blame
Yeah.
the engineer in me.
Well, yeah. So you look at a map like this, and you're thinking, okay, well, what's going on there? What are you really trying to achieve? Are you going to get this land bridge to Transnistria? I mean, that would be super useful. But realistically, like I've said umpteen times, if you took that long to take Bakhmut, right, which is this smaller where are we? Bakhmut there, which is this area there. I mean, that looks big on a map, but when you zoom out, you're thinking, okay, that's not that big. So it took you that long, and you took that many losses to take an area probably that size there, right?
Mm.
How the hell are you going to take Mykolaiv, Odessa, Kherson back again? How are you going to take all this land to Transnistria? And that's just that one objective. How are you going to take all this area there? It's just absolutely insane. So, I'd love to know realistically who is making the military
I
decisions
I
and what
still
they are.
think it's the gas corridor that they're trying to capture. If you go down from Kharkiv and you run a diagonal line. Geez, I'm pointing at the screen and you can't see it. If you go across to Donetsk and then basically go from Donetsk, draw a diagonal line up towards Kharkiv, and then it tips into Belarus. There's a huge gas corridor, which is on incredibly old land. I'm trying to remember. It's about 3.5 million-year-old rock that Ukraine's got there. And I still think that's what they're after. I see you can find a map there. Yeah, that one.
Yeah,
If you go up, that one there to your right, to your left, the one with the purple on it. That
yeah, yeah,
one.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That shows the gas corridor running up, um, and that's a lot of money worth sitting in there. Hell of a
Yeah.
lot of money.
Yeah, interesting, interesting. Well,
So
okay, what we're going to do now for everyone in the live, well, for any viewer, obviously, is that we're just going to run through the military aid news and the geopolitical news. It's just a normal news video, but I wanted to do it live because Matt just reached out to me and said, "Oh, X, Y, and Z." He said something on the private chat to me. I was like, "Let's do it live." Matt, it's been too long. So anyway, I just wanted to start with the strike in Odessa is still, that's a significant strike. It appears to have hit, I think, a supermarket warehouse, 3,000 square meter, Blaze, rather different number that. Russia launched an attack on Odessa using 2 cruise missiles, likely Iskander-K type, but neither reached their targets. Actually, that's been changed to one of the missiles did not reach a target. It was downed. I presume this is the one that was down. Maybe another did reach a target. Don't know about that. But anyway, that's a really significant blaze there. A huge issue in Odessa. It's just so sad to see such wanton destruction as that. And we're going to move on to look at a couple of previous strikes. One that took place last night. This is the one on the array of, where are we? These satellite dishes, but also possibly a command center or vehicles, electronic warfare. There's lots of claims about what has been destroyed there. Tim White, I think this is potentially a really high value strike last night that took place. So more information is emerging about Ukraine's use of ATACMS on occupied Crimea last night. Heavy criticism for Russia from the Z channels for poor air defense and for not sounding an air raid warning to save people on the beach. So that was yesterday. It's reported there was no shelter near most beaches. And then last night, some pro-Russian channels admit 3 more air defense systems were lost near Saki. So 2 S-400 systems and 1 S-300 were completely disabled. Now, I can't talk to the accuracy of that, but that would be massive. If you've got another 3 S-300, S-400 systems being completely disabled, that then opens the door for more strikes on Crimea and those strikes to be even more successful, because these are supposedly the best options they have for taking down ATACMS. And even then, I think it's problematic. Apparent confirmation too that the military unit near Yevpatoria was hit. Local media reports 7 occupiers were killed. And then also a word about the destruction of the vital communications center. So this is one I was talking about in my video earlier, the Vitino space communications, but also like connected with the war effort as well, which was among the targets nicely hit in occupied Crimea. And this is really, really good stuff, I think, last night from the Ukrainians, and indeed over the last month, really, in terms of hitting Crimea and taking out these air defense systems. What are your thoughts on Crimea?
Oh, geez. Okay. Well, as you know, they've just been hitting the air defenses. I think we're going to see amphibious landing quite soon, and I think they'll go across the river at the same time, give us a 2-pronged attack. But I think it might be next year. I don't think that there's going to be much pushing by Ukraine this year. I think they're going to take their time and get it right.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And they've got that 1 S-500 system supposedly somewhere in Crimea, the one that they have that they brought down from Russia. I mean, I keep getting too positive about how things are for Ukraine, knowing that it's still desperately difficult, of course. But there's a lot to be said about how Ukraine have really degraded the Russian capabilities and capacities right across the whole military spectrum. So you've got air defenses have been fundamentally degraded because you've got an S-400, S-500 system brought down from Moscow, but you've also had throughout the process of the war, you've had the idea that they've been bringing S-300s from within Russia down to the front line. Then recently, we've heard that 80% of the personnel and equipment has been taken from the Finnish border and brought down to the front line. You've heard that the Kuril Islands north of Japan, which is these disputed islands over here, have had some S-300s on them. They have now been brought over to Ukraine. So if you're thinking you're bringing from an area of hotly disputed territory, and as far away as you can get really from the Ukrainian front line, and you're bringing systems from there to the front line because you have no other option, then I think it speaks to how desperate things are for the Russians. And then, as you say, this leaves Crimea all the more vulnerable as they get degraded for further strikes. That's in terms of the naval vessels and the port infrastructure, but also all of these other military targets, that Crimea becomes sort of untenable. And then that leads to a potential attack, maybe by Marines and airborne on Crimea at some point in the future. I mean, yeah, it's just, I feel somewhat more positive about Crimea than I did certainly 6 months ago. Yeah, sorry, I just ran out of steam there.
Sorry, and I was answering Marcus, who just gave a a really good question. Just above Mitch. Say thank you, Mitch. That's awesome.
I
Um, yeah.
I hope you,
Oh,
as a
above that one.
communication. All
Above
right.
that one.
Yeah, this one. So, hi
Yeah.
Matt. I have some time asked ago if the Russian Voronezh M over-the-horizon radars can be used to act as GPS signal jammers due to their reflection of the ionosphere working mode. He seems to have written that in Greek.
No, he hasn't. And yeah, I answered kind of potentially, as far as I know, it's just going to be about whether they can actually get off the frequencies. I don't know off the top of my head, but I will do some googling tonight, and I'll send you a response that you can give tomorrow.
So just to let people
Um,
know, there are these
yeah.
Voronezh, these like huge radar over the horizon radars that have like a 3,000 kilometer range that are in place in order to detect incoming nuclear missiles mainly, but also aerial targets and do the usual kind of things as well. And a couple of those have been targeted by the Ukrainians, with people thinking, oh, that's a bit dodgy because actually that's getting into the realms of nuclear warfare, or at least deteriorating Russia's nuclear warfare capabilities, as well as possibly having an effect on how Russia are able to acquire targets just in the air anyway. I think it was a supremely good idea to target those things. Other people less so, but the question there is whether those radars can be used to jam. But anyway, your man Matt will get back to us on that one.
I'm actually intrigued. I hadn't thought about it. So yeah, great question.
Noel reports here that and says juicy on June the 21st. So this is 3 nights ago. A strike was carried out on the 726th Air Defense Training Center in Yeysk, one I reported on, and I showed you how there were two kind of warehouses there, and one was struck, the other was completely destroyed. So I presume it's going to be the completely destroyed part of this. Hit by two cruise missiles, likely R-360 Neptunes. So the Ukrainians are now starting to use Neptunes more frequently. These are indigenously made missiles that are able to be fired into Russia because no one can tell Ukraine that they can't fire their own missiles into Russia. But anyway, I think this is at not maybe not it's a Krasnodar Krai, so it is into Russia. The center, which trains personnel to use various drones, suffered significant damage. The strike killed instructors and technical personnel from Yelabuga and destroyed around 20 Shahed 136s attack drones, around 50 Lancet attack drones, and 40 Zala reconnaissance drones. That is a massively significant dent to Russia's ability to use those, because they can't, because they're blown up. There is no reported information about military personnel casualties. That is a super good haul if that has indeed happened. Excellent news there. And then moving on to this, before we get onto the military aid section, Sladkov, so this is a military blogger, announces the creation of motorcycle squads in some brigades of the Russian army. He says they will be engaged in delivering cargo and evacuating the wounded, only indirectly mentions combat missions, the ones where assaulting motorcyclists are blown to pieces by Ukrainian strike drones. I've talked a lot about the use of both sort of golf carts and motorcycles as being suboptimal. They are maybe useful in certain circumstances, right? So you can, I don't know, instead of having one slower moving, bigger target infantry fighting vehicle or APC that's got 20 people in, you take that out and you could ostensibly take out 20 people with one strike. Now you've got 20 people on motorbikes, you're spreading out your targets, and then you have one drone takes out one person rather than multiple people. And you can see advantages to using motorcycles, but we seem to have got to a place where they're being forced to use motorcycles, and therefore it is a suboptimal option. What are your views on sort of motorcycles and golf buggies?
Well, I wouldn't go to war in one. I think that's the honest answer I think all of us have. If someone said, "Here, ride this motorbike into war," I'd be looking at you like you were mad. I mean, I can't aim a gun on the back of a motorcycle unless you're in the movies. Um, so what am I meant to do? Ride a motorbike in at 60, 80 k's an hour, whatever, suddenly slam on the brakes, and then I'm going to be a target for the next 3 to 5 seconds while I get my bearings. get myself off the bike. It's just stupendous.
Yeah, absolutely. Quick thank you, Richard Bennett, gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. And my friend Mitch Mazarol from Canada, here's something to get the ball rolling today. Thanks for all of your hard work, and a big nod to the folks helping with the charts and stats. Absolutely, Dell, really brilliant, and Bill's stats as well. This is an amazing community fighting a good fight. I really believe that, Mitch, and that's why I was excited to come on and speak, because I genuinely really like. Yeah, there's a personal thing where this floats my boat in the sense of, like, I get to talk about what I want to talk about, but it is a community of just wonderful human beings that are part of this. So I'm just really honoured. And Mitch, thanks for tipping your hat to that, and thanks very much for obviously for your support as well. It allows me to keep doing what I do here. This is what I do every day. So we're now going to go on to military aid. We'll start with the EU has developed a mechanism that will allow it to bypass Hungary's veto on arms purchases for Ukraine at the expense of revenues from frozen Russian assets, Borrell said in an interview with the Financial Times. So that's really good, because Hungary are a difficult player in EU and with NATO. They are very much under the Russian sphere of influence or in it, and they stop Ukraine being able to get aid and support quite often, either stop it fully or delay it annoyingly, and that costs lives. So Hungary are basically doing the bidding of Russia. So this is great that there's a way of bypassing that. And again, it just gives you the sense that Hungary have become this pariah nation that just aren't playing with the rest of the team. So Hungary frustrate the bejesus out of me, and I just hope that Peter Magyar, the new opposition figure, will gain momentum. He took 30% of the votes in the recent EU elections, which is really good. And indeed, Viktor Orban's Fidesz party at sort of 40% of the got 40% of votes, was the lowest showing they've ever had in the EU election. So that's a good movement for Hungary. What are your views on Hungary in the EU and NATO?
I've just been floored because Mark said that Tucker Carlson's coming to Australia.
Oh, goodness.
But apparently I don't know. I don't think he's coming to Perth. It's saying that they're no longer on sale in Perth. So maybe we've gotten a brain.
Well, we'll come back to that.
Sorry.
No. That because that will fit in nicely with where we go in the geopolitical section.
I'm just wondering how long I'll get, for finally ridding the world of Tucker Carlson. Jesus. Sorry. So your question was
Hungary. What are your views on Hungary in the EU and NATO?
I just wish the Hungarian leadership would stop taking money from Putin and represent their people, because I haven't met many Hungarian people that are running around saying, let Ukraine burn, but I've met quite a few saying, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry what's happening to Ukraine. So, yeah, be a politician of your country and support your own people.
Thanks to Louise Foley. About time you two got together again.
Yes.
Slava Ukraini. Absolutely. Thanks, Louise. I really appreciate that. And Joe Hales, keep up good work, guys. We rely on these updates. Thank you very much, Joe. That's really kind of you. So let's indeed get on with the updates. So Joseph Borrell is due to announce today the first tranche of 1.4 billion euros in profits from frozen Russian assets to Ukraine. Now, we've heard that that is going to be spent on military support, which is really good. Funds will be sent through Germany, Denmark, and Czech Republic, and they'll already make purchases. Already be able to make purchases. I've heard so Flash News or Bliskavka says Ukraine will receive 2.5 billion in proceeds from Russian assets next week. I don't know if this is, there's various numbers are floating around. Suffice to say that Ukraine are going to get a bunch of money, up to around $3 billion by the end of, well, actually €3 billion, which is more than $3 billion by the end of the year. Some of it is coming right now, imminently. So that's going to be really good news for getting the wheels rolling in terms of getting some more military aid for the Ukrainians. Now, speaking of which, Ukrainian armed forces will receive their first batch of ammunition under the Czech initiative by the end of June. Czech Defense Minister Jana Černochová said. Now, this is good news. We've been waiting for this. Actually, the uptick in the use of Ukrainian artillery hasn't been to do, well, it hasn't directly been to do with the Czech initiative artillery ammunition because they haven't received any yet, but it allows them to start eating into their stockpiles because they've got more confidence that they have ammunition coming, as well as the US ammunition that came from their military aid package, and of course the consistent ammunition and the ramping up of European production of ammunition as well. So all of that together allows Ukraine to use more ammunition. But this is really good news. They're going to get that Czech initiative, but there are some caveats to apply here. She assured that the ammunition would be inspected by specialists and repaired if necessary before being sent to Ukraine. Now that repair bit is really important because actually Czech company, this is No Reports reporting on May the 30th. Czech company Czechoslovak Group warns that rising prices and poor quality mean half of the shells it receives cannot be sent to Ukraine promptly. CSG plans to start supplying shells in June, but faces issues with shells from Africa and Asia requiring additional processing. In other words, the quality of these, if you think the quality of the North Korean shells going to Russia, think the same with some of these shells coming from, I don't know, South Africa and India are two places that have been mentioned. People are keeping a bit quiet about that, but it is evident that those shells aren't always up to scratch, and so therefore quite a bit of work needs to be put into them to make them operational or usable. On the same kind of note, Wall Street Journal reports, says Colby Badwa, that the first of 3 production lines at the new General Dynamics Ordnance and Tactical Systems 155mm shell body plant in Mesquite will be fully operational by autumn. As previously reported, workers from the Turkish firm Repcon, the main subcontractor, are finishing installation and commissioning of that first line and are already working on the second line. Each line will produce 10,000 shell bodies per month. So the US is really stepping up its shell production. That's really good news. And as long as the US keeps supporting Ukraine going past November, then hey, this is good news. I mean, wouldn't it be annoying for these concerns, these industrial concerns, if they ramp up production capabilities and then November comes along, Trump gets in and he says no, and either the US government or these contractors have spent so much money and then the aid isn't forthcoming. So hopefully there's contracts that are being signed that mean that any new administration will be bound to provide assistance to Ukraine. Let me know if you want to pop in. Otherwise, I'll keep rolling on, mate.
Yeah. I'm just answering some comments.
Cool beans.
Yep.
Yeah, nice one. Thanks, mate. So Ukraine is to create squadrons of up to 20 naval drones with the separate functions, which in combination repeat the capabilities of one fully fledged warship. I talked about this as Wall Street Journal talking about this. I mentioned this in my previous video, but for those who didn't see that, this is really cool because functionally 20 Sea Baby drones with different abilities will have the same capabilities as a warship. That's the understanding here, which is great because if you can't get warships to the Black Sea because the Bosphorus Straits are closed, then you have to recreate the function of a warship in other ways. So they have got around the problem in a way that also will not cause the death of sailors. So actually, we could start seeing like the death of navies as we start getting autonomous vessels floating around the world, or a whole bunch of drones doing the work of a larger warship. I don't know whether that's realistic.
Gonna end up with a battleship with a cope gauge.
Yeah. So a mixture of Terminator versus like Mad Max, I think is where we're going. But what's interesting about this article is the talk of the sea babies that can drop off mines, plastic mines, by the looks of it, that are harder to detect. And apparently this has caused the damage or destruction of 4 ships that I presume we've not been aware of. And then I mentioned earlier that I was seeing an analysis yesterday, someone looking at different satellite images saying there seemed to be, and I can't remember how many, it might have even been 4 ships that weren't on the satellite images now that were on them before, both in Sevastopol and Novorossiysk. And the idea is there could be some missing ships, and there could be some destroyed Russian ships that we have not been made aware about because it's not been caught on camera. These may be ships that have hit a mine and sunk and no one's recorded it. And because if it's a Sea Baby that takes out a ship itself, then you get the recording that comes back from the cameras on the Sea Baby. Well, if it's a mine, you don't have that ability, and so therefore it could be the case that more Russian ships have been sunk than we were previously aware, which is absolutely fantastic for the Ukrainians.
You're just waiting for the Seed Babies to have ground-to-air missiles placed on them, and then going out in a swarm with Sea Babies with the air defense, and then just hanging out there with the ships or the kamikaze boats to basically laugh at the Russian military. That's going to be the next step, I think.
Yeah, Ronnie Vranken says, didn't hear anything about the UK donated laser cannon after it was reported by Jonathan. Does anyone have an update on it? My latest is that they're going to be putting it on UK ships, but also getting out to Ukraine. It's one of these things that's pretty much brand new, so I guess they'd have to scale production in some way, although it's not going to be something mass manufactured. This is a very technical piece of kit. I don't know. I wonder whether the first we'll hear about it is when it's used on the front line. But I assume this will be forthcoming because Grant Shapps, the Defense Secretary, was talking very explicitly about getting these to Ukraine. So this isn't something that's been kind of rumored on Twitter or whatever. This is a properly announced but cutting edge bit of kit. So for those who don't know, there's something called a Dragonfire laser that can fire a kilometer. A laser fires I don't know what you call it, just a laser. A kilometer
light.
fires
light
a kilometer and can hit to the accuracy of a £1 coin at a kilometer. So it's incredibly accurate. You can imagine, you can get a drone, maybe a Shahed or even a smaller drone, a reconnaissance drone or something. It will be able to hit that. Although a kilometer isn't that far, right? When you're talking about something like a Gepard, it will fire at sort of 5 kilometers. To a 5 kilometer range. Some of these newer ones coming online, like the Skynex ones, I think, or one that was mentioned recently was sort of 6 kilometers, which I think is really significant. That extra couple of kilometers gives you
really pushing the physics of a laser, really pushing it.
Well, yeah. So obviously there isn't the ability, well, at least not at the moment, to do that with a laser. So you would have to have it a lot closer. But if you have something like a energy plant, then having it there hitting a drone or a missile, I don't know if it could strike a cruise missile at that speed. I don't know what the capabilities are, but
yes they can, but the problem is the cruise missile usually has a metal body, so you're not going to get the heat penetration through.
Right. Okay. But it could at least send it off course. But anyway, like these lasers only cost £10 to shoot. So when you're talking about like a Gepard firing all that lead into the air, each Gepard shell, and this is like a big kind of autocannon, each of them costs $500 to $600. So the benefit of using this laser, I mean, if it doesn't cost crazy amounts to build, then you can put 10 of these around an energy plant and just fire lasers into the air at a relatively cheap, an insanely cheap price in terms of what munitions normally cost. So yeah, it's a really exciting development, but we haven't heard anything since then, to be honest. Okay, moving on. Ukraine has received an experimental American Hawkeye MWS. So far, the Hawkeye has only been tested by the US Army. In Ukraine, it's undergoing testing in actual combat conditions. This is something we've seen a lot from Rheinmetall with their Skynex system, and lots of drone, I think, companies have been testing in Ukraine. Well, here, I mean, there's no better test bed than an actual war zone. The main tactical principle of the Hawkeye is to rapidly fire shells at the enemy and quickly relocate from its position. Of course, shoot and scoot is under a bit of scrutiny at the moment because actually the scooting part means that you are far more visible to drones flying in the sky, and then you are more vulnerable. So actually, people are saying, well, you need to shoot and hide, stay where you are. But this American AM General delivered test samples of its 105 millimeter mobile howitzer. That's what it is, and it has a firing range of 11 to 15 kilometers, which for a howitzer is pretty good. That's the same kind of range as a really crappy D10 howitzer, probably, with its cruddy barrel. So that's amazing. And if it's designed to fire quite quickly as well, then sounds pretty cool to me. So yeah, good news. Hopefully that can get online and help out the Ukrainians. The Czech mission to eastern Ukraine has handed over 13 water treatment plants, cargo. These are shipping containers that have been turned into water treatment facilities. That's awesome. Yes, so that's excellent. Thank you to that Czech concern that's done that. It's a Czech-Taiwanese project. They will provide drinking water for more than 100,000 people in 13 villages around Kryvyi Rih. So that's a place that gets consistently hit when you've got not only facilities getting taken out by missile strikes and drone strikes, but also the issue with electricity going off and on. Something like water provision might be intermittent. So that's good news there. A big drone bomber, the Queen of Hornets from Wild Hornets. I want to interview the guy from Wild Hornets. I've contacted him, but he hasn't read my message. But his guy that put me onto him knows that I'm trying to contact him. Anyway, this is a Ukrainian drone concern called Wild Hornets, and they developed the Queen of Hornets. Can drop a powerful 4-kilogram thermobaric munition on the Russians. But it's also capable of carrying and launching an FPV drone from it, and then acting as a radio repeater. So what these drones can do, typically, that's really you can't hear that, so that's great on this one. That's blasting my ears out. So this is the Queen of Hornets that then drops another drone off it. And then acts as a repeater. So if the Queen of Hornets has a 20-kilometer range, and that FPV drone has a 20-kilometer range, then you are giving a 40-kilometer range for that FPV drone effectively. And that's obviously really useful. Or it can just drop a big old munition itself. So these larger drones are very useful. Of course, they are louder and more visible. So they do come with caveats. But it's great to see Ukraine working on these. Of course, the Russians are too, and we'll come to that in a second. In fact, here's a Ukrainian way of taking out another drone. I'm getting my ears blasted again, but don't worry about
that. I can hear it through your mic from your hearing.
So this is one that's being poked with a stick, effectively. It looks, I think, genuinely, it's got a stick coming out the bottom of the drone, and it just rams it with a stick and takes it out. I don't know if this stick actually did take it out, but there's this quote: "I know not with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones." Einstein once said. Well, there you go. There's a stick taking out a drone. Now, the Russians have developed their own drone here, and this is called Net Comet. The system is installed on an interceptor drone, which flies up to the enemy drone from above and throws a special net at it, which entangles the propellers and causes a subsequent uncontrolled fall of that drone. I will mute that before I play it anymore. So we had seen these in development earlier in the war. I'd reported on these both sides, I think, actually. But here we now, and this is definitely on the battlefront, because these are pockmarked ground. This is not a test area. This is, I'm assuming this is on Ukrainian drones. So there are Ukrainian drones that are being taken out by these nets, and I think that pretty clever, pretty low tech, but useful for the Russians here. So this is a 1 minute 45 of Ukrainian drones being taken out by this net. So yeah, it seems to be working. And I would say that Ukrainians are going to be working on similar things to that, because drone on drone is becoming more and more prevalent as this war goes on. And here's a UGV, an unmanned ground vehicle from Russia's Dva Mayora project, and it's been built from commercial scooters, and its function is to put up, in this case anyway, to put up a smoke screen. I was just thinking that's an incredible smoke screen. The amount of smoke that gets thrown out of this, what looks like a mine there. But anyway, that's there are more and more UGVs finding their way to the battlefront at the moment. We are seeing a number of them on lost lists. Andrew Perpetua's lost list will occasionally have these UGVs. We can see them being used to drag people off.
I can see the Lada tag on it.
but
Sorry.
but still doing a job. And you know, they get used for a variety of things. Here we've got one being used to create a smoke screen. We've seen them drag people off the front lines who have been injured, even dead bodies as well as having machine guns put on them. Dropping mines is a very common one, mine layers. So yeah, they are becoming a useful component of the war here for Russia. Now, this worries me somewhat. This is more Russian stuff here. I suppose, says this source, to limit my activities to what we do, but you have to see it. Russians have also been printing groups for Russian soldiers, also have printing groups, hundreds, if not thousands of printers. This one is one of the small mobile farms. It is a real arms race among civilian groups. So this is what Russians are doing in producing, by the looks of it, some kind of shell casings using 3D printers. But you know, they've got here dozens and dozens of 3D printers working, one would presume 24/7, to produce these plastic shell casings. In here you've got, because of the heat of there, you've got lots of fans and air conditioning. But yeah, it's look at what they produce. This is incredibly resourceful, and we know that both sides use 3D printers. We know that Ukrainians are using them a lot. We know that the British MOD have actually got some metal 3D printers to help make obsolete parts for vehicles that you can no longer get those parts for, that are broken down on the front line. I don't know whether they are being used now, but they're a bit like the Dragon Fire. They're on the way to Ukraine.
That looks just like a shipping container.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
highly transportable, just behind the back lines. Yeah, that's a scary thought.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, thank
And
you,
then
Graham. Just
yeah. I'm going to be coming on to some thanks in a bit. In a minute, people are being super generous. So Anton Gerashchenko here says, Putin complained Russia was on its own in the war. Was his visit to North Korea not as successful as he wanted it to be? So just after getting back from North Korea, where you assume he's going to get given a bunch of equipment or artillery ammunition and whatnot, Putin here says we can only count on ourselves in that regard. No one is going to lend us a hand and give anything to us. We're all on our own. That's a really interesting narrative he's spinning there. This idea that that you know that they are on their own, they don't have any friends, and he's saying that just after getting back from North Korea, where they've done a bilateral security agreement, and one would assume that are going to get a bunch of stuff. So maybe they're not going to get as much stuff as he was hoping, or he's just playing the narrative here and saying that, oh, because this is the grievance narrative. On the one hand, as a Russian citizen, you might look at what's going on with the war, right, and just say, oh, this is terrible. Woe is us. Oh my goodness. Everyone hates us. They must hate us for a reason. Therefore, Putin's a plonker, and I'm not going to support the war or support Putin. That's one way of interpreting it. But actually, it's more likely, it seems to me, that you get this entrenchment and this victim narrative that gets played out, which is, oh, the West hate us. We're the good ones. We're the ones standing up for what is good and right in the world. Everyone else hates us. It's the rest of the world that's wrong, and we just need to get more. I don't know, more confident that we are the good guys, and we'll just, I suppose, support each other in this belief and become this like isolated pariah nation. But it's the rest of the world that's wrong, and the rest of the world that's decadent and degraded morally, and so on and so forth. And maybe that's what Putin's playing into here by saying, hey, we're on our own, guys. We're on our own, but we're going to fight the good fight.
It works for Trump. When he plays the victim, you know, no one's ever done this as bad. No one's ever done this, has gone through this, anything like that. Victim.
Yeah, actually, so yeah, I know I can be accused of
Sorry
being
to bring up Trump.
well, yeah, I can be accused of being anti-Trump, and I know I have Trump supporters in my viewership, but I'm anti-Trump for a good reason, but actually this is a really common narrative, which is the grievance narrative. That's why I mentioned that, which is woe is us, we're the victims. No one's ever been this harsh to a president. It's like, nah, actually, I can think of some who were assassinated. So that was a little bit harsher than how you've been treated. They've been killed, shot in the head. But anyway, it's like, woe is me, and bringing the people along with him, like, you are the persecuted. You're the persecuted people in this nation, you Trump supporters. And he develops that kind of unity within that support. So yeah, I think that is a really good analogy to have made there. Right, we'll then go on to this last bit of military aid, which is again Russian. So just after saying we're on our own, Washington Post reports that North Korea may have transferred 1.6 million shells to Russia over 6 months. The report highlights that Russia, facing dwindling ammunition supplies, is depending on its few allies. So even if he's not being perfectly honest, but because there are North Korea supporting him, Iran is supporting him, there aren't many that are doing it as overtly as these guys are. Anyway, while isolated North Korea seeks opportunities to generate income, a comprehensive partnership treaty between Russia and North Korean governments provides formal justification for ammunition shipments. That is definitely a worry that North Korea are doing that. Although the silver lining to that cloud is that South Korea are hopefully going to be doing something about that. But I just worry that they're going to wait to see what Russia gets to North Korea, because that's what they're more worried about. They're not so worried about North Korea getting munitions to Russia to use against Ukraine, because that doesn't affect them directly. They feel more affected by what Russia gives to North Korea, so that North Korea can have better weapons to shoot at South Korea. That's what they're watching out for, but that might not happen straight away. So that it could be that you get millions more shells going from North Korea to Russia, and South Korea won't react to that, and they'll wait for what comes the other way. That's my worry. Right, we are going to move on to geopolitical stuff, but just before so, I'm going to give some big love, big thanks to people. Mark Biscu, as ever, Mark and Olena, who are such legends. And I've interviewed them a number of times. Go and check them out on the lives. They're living in Canada at the moment. For a nice bottle of wine for each from Olena and me. Question for Matt. I spent 3 months in Australia. Loved it. How does Matt and most Aussies feel about Tucker's visit to Australia? Does Tucker and his views have a big following there? We'll come on to that. So don't answer that yet, Matt. But that is his question. I'll flash that back up in a minute. And thanks so much to Kevin Force for gifting 10 ATP memberships, ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thanks, Kevin. Such a great supporter of the channel. Really appreciate that. We will get to that kind of discussion in a wee minute. We'll start with Ukraine's EU accession negotiations begin tomorrow. This is really good news in Luxembourg. Now, I don't expect they'll get accession to the EU before 2030, but obviously you need to start somewhere, and it's really good that that's been expedited. Featuring a Ukrainian delegation comprised of representatives from the cabinet, the president's office, parliament, and various state agencies. Awesome. The EU has adopted the 14th package of sanctions against Russia, including restrictions on the transit of Russian LNG, liquefied natural gas, through European ports, the EU Council has said. The updated sanctions list includes 116 individuals and legal entities from Russia. This is really great, getting a much wider net to stop the Russians either profiteering off the war or being able to fund the war. Now, the EU, in adopting this package, as says Anton Gerashchenko, he gives some more details. The EU also included 61 companies from Russia, China, UAE, Turkey. So it's not just Russian companies, but those that are helping support the Russian war from abroad. Some of the restrictions are, as mentioned, a ban on Russian LNG transshipment services within the EU, a ban on a ban on port access and services for 27 vessels associated with the Russian shadow fleet. That's really good. Close those loopholes. Ban on the use of Russia's financial messaging system. Ban on imports of helium from Russia and exports to Russia of manganese ores, some types of plastics, rare earth elements, and electronic components. Ban on receiving funding from the Russian state for political parties and EU funds. EU companies are responsible for ensuring that their subsidiaries in third countries do not circumvent sanctions against Russia. That one there is mahusively important. Right, this is massive. So I've talked about how difficult it is to stop components getting to Russia. So if I'm making widgets in the US, for example, and I sell it to someone else, who then sells it to someone else in the US, to someone else, and then that person exports it to Kyrgyzstan, perfectly legally, and then the people in Kyrgyzstan export it into Russia, then it's very difficult for me making the widgets to be able to have full control over my widgets ending up in Russia. So I never really blame those initial companies, but how do we stop that system from being able to operate in that manner? And the EU here said that companies are responsible for ensuring that their subsidiaries in third countries do not circumvent sanctions. Now, I don't know that it would stop that, but what it may do, if I was a company in the US, if it's a subsidiary I have in Kyrgyzstan, then they can't directly export into Russia. So it's probably not going to stop that initial situation, which is still very difficult to, I think, regulate for. Anyway, that's just my off the top of my head thinking. EU's banned its airlines from operating charters and private flights around the world on behalf of individuals and companies from Russia. And the EU companies selling military goods to third countries must identify and assess the risks of re-exporting them to Russia. That's really important as well. So a whole suite of things there that I always, when I read these, I think, well, why wasn't that done first off? Do you know what? 2 years ago, that would have been really useful, but better late than never, I guess. And here, having heard that, apparently, well, the way I understand this is that those sanctions would have been even harsher, but Germany blocked. Here it says Germany blocked the entire new package of sanctions against Russia. In particular, Scholz is against the measures to crack down on circumvention. The Scholz-Orban axis is really a thing. And here's a newspaper title saying Germany prevents even tougher sanctions against Russia. Another source here says, and of course, refuses to talk about Russian sabotage and murders in Germany. So Germany's seen the Deal automotive, Deal Metal plant burnt down recently, and evidently it's not something they're talking about. Why aren't they talking about it? Well, this has come out today as well. So Olaf Scholz said that the fall in the ratings of the government in Germany is partly connected with the support of Ukraine. Quote, there are many citizens who do not agree with our support for Ukraine, who also do not agree with the sanctions that we have imposed against Russia. This is also reflected in the election results, but in my opinion, there are no alternative now to change it. So although he's saying that we're unpopular because of our support of Ukraine, he's saying that we're not going to change that. Well, Kyiv Independent reports here. Scholz says his party's support for Ukraine is connected to its declining popularity. The decreasing popularity of Germany's SDP, headed by Scholz, is connected to some voters' opposition to the party's support for Ukraine, Scholz said in an interview with Tagesschau. The effect is most directly felt in some states in Germany's east, where the SDP polling is at 7%, ahead of upcoming local elections scheduled for September. So I wonder, although he says there's no change there, if they were putting up some a bit of I forget, I can't think of the word. If they're trying to stop these sanctions being as harsh as possible, then I hope this isn't the case, but it could be that Scholz is trying to go a bit soft on Russia in the hope that it might positively affect local election results in East Germany. I hope that's not the case, but that seems to be the implication from here. And that would be hugely unpopular amongst our kind of circles where we want Russia to be held as accountable as possible. And we need to be stopping Russia from being able to prosecute this war, to fund this war. And then the same note here, we have French aid to Ukraine reporting, I think this is all from a Le Parisien article. Enraged by Macron's growing support for Ukraine, the Kremlin is anticipating a possible victory for the National Rally. So Rassemblement National, Marine Le Pen's right-wing party that is becoming more and more popular, which is less hostile to Moscow. By less hostile, what he really means, or what they really mean, is gets their funding from Moscow and really is quite supportive. And we'll come on to that in a second. On June the 17th, while the Euro 2024 football match between Romania and Ukraine was censored by Russian broadcasters, the country's state media focused on Kylian Mbappe's call to vote against the extremes. It was another opportunity for Russia to portray French society as more divided. Right, just to let people know about this, particularly if you're in America and you're not really following the Euros 2024, so soccer, football. Kylian Mbappe is one of the best footballers in the world, and he is a French superstar. He's a black striker who is so that the French, I think Lilian Thuram did this as well, or his son has just recently done this. So another French footballer and his son who now plays. they are being quite outspoken politically. So you get quite often, and America does this, where you get people like Laura Ingraham on Fox News saying, stick to, stick to scoring goals or whatever she says. Like, you shouldn't get involved in politics. And actually, sports people are just as much right as any other human being to get involved in politics. Thank you very much. And their views are just as important as yours, Laura Ingraham. So, stick it. But anyway, here we've got sports people who. So what happened in 1998? France held the World Cup, and France won it in 1998, and they won it with what was called, was it the Rainbow Team? So it was called that because you had lots of immigrant players, or players from an immigrant background, playing for the French national team at a time where there have been some issues with immigration and whatnot, and it did a really good job of unifying France. So not only did they win the World Cup, but they also it also solved some of their social cohesion issues and the issue with the rising far right. Anyway, since then, it's gone a bit backwards. So now you've got Kylian Mbappe came out and said explicitly, don't vote for Rassemblement National. And you had a number of football players reiterating this. And this is hugely important, because actually Rassemblement National have been gaining with the youth vote quite a bit. They are gaining very much right across society in France, and a lot of that will be linked to immigration, which will be amplified by Russia. So Russia takes this news, doesn't talk about how the Romanian fans were slagging off Putin in the crowd, but does talk about how Kylian Mbappe is saying this, and how France is divided. And of course, they will just amplify both sides to create that disunity in France. Anyway, hopefully that gives you some context to what is being mentioned here. Quote, recently the gap between Paris and Moscow has widened. Russia's absence from the D-Day ceremonies, followed by Zelensky's visit to Paris, or the French president's announcement about sending instructors and Mirage 2005s to Ukraine, have further angered Putin, to the point of leaving coffins at the foot of the Eiffel Tower and arresting a French humanitarian in Moscow. So the announcement of the dissolution on the 9th of June, that's the dissolution of Parliament and the Assembly, and the prospect of a national rally in Matignon, supported ideologically and for a time financially by the Kremlin, delighted the government and the Russian media. So always look to see who Russia is supporting. Yes, they also often support both sides, but really, who do they want to win in this election? They want Rassemblement National. So then the question is, why do they want that? And to whose benefit will it be if Rassemblement National win? In the Russian press, there is a recollection of March 2017, when Marine Le Pen was welcomed in the Kremlin as a head of state. Quote, before the war, she really liked Moscow. She came there several times to meet Russian officials. But the media, who see Jordan Bardella, so he's Marine Le Pen's number two, if you like, and Jordan Bardella will be, so Marine Le Pen wants to be president, wants to replace Emmanuel Macron in 2027. Jordan Bardella wants to replace Gabriel Attal, who's a present prime minister. So Macron's the president, and his party prime minister is Attal. But if Rassemblement National do really well in the elections, Jordan Bardella will become the prime minister, which means that the politics in France will shift significantly in favor of Russia. So the media, who see Bardella as their candidate, because the media in France is becoming increasingly right-wing and supporting Rassemblement National, do not get carried away, and each time note the evolution of the positions of national rally personalities on the Ukrainian issue. The newspaper Izvestia points out that Bardella considers Crimea to be, quote, historically and culturally Russian, and, quote, insists on the lifting of the French energy sanctions, pointing out that that it is only the French who suffer from them. In other words, the Rassemblement National incoming prime minister, if it will be Jordan Bardella, will be claiming that his Crimea should be and is Russian, and will lift sanctions, or work to lift sanctions on Russia. This is really counterproductive for Ukrainian support. Bardella's position on the refusal to send instructors to Ukraine has been welcomed by the Russian press. The newspaper Komsomolskaya Pravda has also chosen its candidate. In a long portrait, it calls Bardella, quote, a child prodigy and Ken from Barbie. So they love Bardella, and of course, my position would be, whoever the Kremlin are shouting for, I would want the opposite. In the center of the capital, many of Putin's supporters are jubilant. Quote, if the National Rally wins the next elections and leads the government, the little European political psychopaths who want to fight with Russia will bite their tongues. In general, France will become more favorable to Russia, and we can dream of a triple alliance of France, Hungary, and Slovakia, said one Russian. I have just understood that Macron panicked after losing the elections. He is finally paying for his support of Ukraine. We wish you good luck for the Olympics. We won't be there, and that's a good thing. So the Russians generally are wanting National Rally to do well, and this is bad for Ukraine. I am super worried because I think Russia are losing on the battlefield, but winning in the political arena. And I think they're winning in how they are changing the political landscape. In Germany, we just talked about that. In France, and we're going to go on to talk about even in the UK, and we're going to mention that again. We can talk about that in terms of Trump in the US. We can talk about that in terms of obviously France here with Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella. I am deeply, deeply worried about this element of the war. This is part of the hybrid war and the political influence campaigns that Russia are now so good at, they're now so experienced at, are having a tangible effect on the political landscape in Europe. What are your thoughts?
I honestly don't know. Like, okay, I've been kind of parallel, but the same type of thing. Speaking to my mum over the last month, and she's getting progressively more and more right wing, always going migrants, migrants, migrants. And she keeps citing to me problems in England. I'm like, Mum, you haven't lived in England for 45 years. So what's the relevance? But there's something that they never tell you, and we always keep going back to immigration. We always keep going back to it. It's a problem. People aren't integrating, but they never actually tell you that all of our societies need immigrants for our labor forces. No,
Yeah,
no politician's prepared to say that, and so you then create this right wing problem.
yeah, I've seen a lot of analyses on this in the US where Jake Bro talked about this a lot, which is if you really want to solve the
Mm.
immigration, what some call the immigration problem in the US, then you need to have a go at you need to criminalize the employment of immigrants because actually that's predominantly why they're coming over for jobs and for money. And when you look at immigration flows into the US, they align very, very strongly with the economic landscape. So when there's a boom time in the US, you get much higher immigration than when there's a bust time. And therefore, it's underwritten by economics. And so then if you want to solve that issue, then you need to look at other ways around it than just building a big wall. That you need to be a bit clever about it. So you criminalize people who employ illegal immigrants. But the thing is, they don't kind of want to do that because they understand the economic impact of those immigrants on sectors like in the US care or maintenance or whatever. And so it's very complicated because and I've read some analyses on this, and I know lots of people. I'm not like pro-immigrant or anti-immigrant, but I'm just trying to understand the implications here, where there's a lot of analysis on even illegal immigration being a net positive economically for the US. Now, that's some people will say, I'm not so interested about that. It's about cultural integration. It's about blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's a whole other argument. But in order to understand why nothing's been done about it for the last 40 years effectively, you have to understand that it's because there's such a big economic boon to immigrants that actually people people higher up don't really want to do it.
Mm. Definitely, we're actually getting quite a few comments back in the chat about immigration. But there was just one when someone mentioned, and I've missed it now. Oh, Vigo was saying illegal immigrants, not legal, and so this is actually the what I'd call the misrepresentation. Is all I can know, and I can only really speak of Australia. 99% of immigration in Australia is legal. Out of the illegal immigrants, the highest proportionate is actually English, Irish, Scottish, Welsh backpackers
That was me
who
in
overstay.
1996. I had a visa in 1996.
Yeah, but most of them overstay, and so much so that the Australian government ended up changing that you could come for 2 years to backpack around Australia when they finally realised Australia was big and it took more than a year to get around it.
Yeah.
You know, So most of our actual illegal immigration is actually overstays. We don't have a big problem with it. Same as like the UK. It's an island, but the UK has massive immigration still from India, Pakistan, from was it
Yeah.
1950 treaties
So
or something?
what happened after Brexit is that it should have, stopped immigration largely, but it's
Mm,
actually spiked immigration. So immigration has gone
yeah.
really high up because we were getting legal people coming in to do jobs in certain sectors that would come from Europe and Eastern Europe and so on and so forth. Then that stopped, and then we're like, well, we
We
need
need
those
workers.
people, and so they've cut. So brown-skinned immigrants have come in, and that's got the people who were like worried about immigration back in 2016 even more angry, because there's even less the immigrants that they kind of want by and large. And I know
Yeah.
that that's not for everyone, and so on and so forth. And it's highly controversial what I'm saying. Possibly, if I'm not to belittle the issue of immigration, I'm trying not to actually cast any value judgment on immigration. I'm just trying to explain what's been going on and why it's so difficult to fix. And the same with the UK, it's difficult to fix because actually, if we are not training up enough, so a great way of looking at this is with, say, the health sector. So over decades, and this has been the problem, is that we've not invested in training our own nurses up, because we can spend, like, I don't know, £100,000 training up a nurse, or we can spend £0 and get a nurse from the Philippines. So,
Hmm.
so you think from an economic point of view, it's like, oh, the government, we can spend 100,000 times I don't know 20,000, or we can spend minimal amounts, just creaming off these other countries that train up these nurses and get them and attract them to our country. And so that's what's happening. And then you find out you've hollowed out your training systems, and then we don't have the ability to train the amount of nurses and whatnot that we need. And so uh, and it's all connected to education and all of this. And if you start degrading all of these sectors, then you find, well, the only realistic way we can get this expertise in is by you know nicking them off other countries. And so it takes a long, and the problem with the UK is our government, I said this the other day, in terms of like China can afford to strategically plan because they're a dictatorship, right, where Xi Jinping's just there until he dies. So he can think in terms of like, well, what do we want China to be in 20 years? Whereas in the UK we can only think in 4-year cycles. I'm not advocating dictatorships, but there is the ramification of existing on a 4-year democratic cycle, that we don't have long-term enough thinking, and everything's short-term and appealing to the next election. And that is a real issue. Anyway, that's to say,
You've got a solution sitting there in Buckingham Palace.
that what do you mean by that?
Well, Charles is not doing anything at the moment, is he?
Oh yeah,
He's
yeah. Let's bring back the monarchy. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
No,
you know,
probably not.
long term planning. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Come on, Charles, earn your tax break or whatever. Yeah.
Sorry
So
for that tangent.
no, so well, no,
Apologise
but
for
this is important. So when you then see, we understand then that immigration is a really divisive subject, right? So I'm sure there are people in the threads right now saying, "You're wrong, JP, and this is why you're wrong." I'm not trying to be like, I'm not saying immigration is good or bad. I'm just saying here are the
that.
ramifications of having lots of it or not having it or whatever.
Mm. Oh,
But
I was
being such a
just saying.
divisive issue, Russia can therefore weaponize it to cause disunity, as they did, I think, in the Brexit election, and as they are doing continually in EU elections, and why they're able to really weaponize that, or how they're able to weaponize that with, say, MAGA Trumpism, which is to say, you have a genuine grievance of people who are genuinely concerned about immigration for genuine reasons, right?
Mm.
But it's not that this is a completely made up thing, but it's amplified to seem like it's much worse than it really is. So the idea for your mum who hasn't lived in the UK for 45 years, my question would be, are those concerns she has she received those concerns because they've been amplified
It's
beyond what they
coming
really
out
are?
of Twitter, and it's always that, there's they were saying there's some politician in the UK's who's now running, and he's going, he wants Muslim law, Sharia law, is it?
Sharia law.
Sharia law, and she's making a big deal about this, and I'm going, who cares? It can't happen.
But
You
oh
know,
right, so this is really interesting. Okay, so if this is Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, right? There is a meme that's been going around for several years now that he wanted to introduce Sharia law because
this
he's a
this was a
Muslim.
guy up in up north somewhere,
All right,
maybe
but
Birmingham.
this is
Right.
really interesting. So I was listening to a James O'Brien interview on LBC the other day where someone pulled up that he said, look, we're going to have like our mayor wants Sharia law. And he's like, hang on. James O'Brien said, hang on, I've not heard this. Is this actual thing? You've come on to complain about this. You've built your entire case on this idea of Sharia law. He said, and while he was speaking to the guy, while James O'Brien was interviewing him, he was Googling the claim of Sadiq Khan and Sharia law.
Mm.
And he found the article that was like debunked it. This is a myth. They can't even spell it right in the original meme and blah, blah, blah. And it was just complete made up of whole cloth. So that was one of these ones where an actual lie was made up of a whole cloth. And you've then got that being repeated hugely. So you've got this amplification of a lie there that then spreads, fake news spreads 6 times faster than truth, and then you get a bunch of people having this opinion of the mayor of London which is absolutely incorrect, and you're like, damn it, this is what we're fighting against the whole time. So Russia are just so good. I'm not saying that came from the Russians, but they are so good at being able to weaponize that and use that.
I was just going to go on one little further bit here is when we talk about immigrants, my family, we're immigrants. So we were economic migrants. Remember, late 70s UK, you couldn't even get the rubbish taken out. So we moved to Australia with my father, who was only mechanic. My mum was, yeah, hadn't gone through uni yet or anything like that. So we ended up with my mum going to uni, becoming a school teacher, my twin sister going through uni, becoming a teacher, me an engineer, my older sister did history and something else. And so you're talking about we're economic migrants, which are, supposedly the worst ones in the world. Yet, I'd say that we definitely gave back to Australia. I know,
Yeah.
looking at my tax bill over the last 20 years, I definitely gave back,
Well, yeah,
so they're
I
not
was
bad,
Yeah, I
you know.
was arguing when I was debating Brexit in 2016. I was doing obviously a lot of research for that, and yeah, the data's there for net contribution. I mean, migrants do give are net
Mm,
contributors, even though you're often told they sponge. What's really interesting is you look at the amount of tax fraud that corporations have compared to the amount of like welfare fraud. That's another like misnomer. It's like we
yeah.
shouldn't be chasing after the most vulnerable in society. We should be going after the richest tax evaders who are not paying their fair share. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. Right. The idea of a defensive. So Jordan Bardella, who is this possibly future prime minister of the Rassemblement National in France, has talked about we only want to give defensive weapons. And of course, then Sébastien Lecornu, the present defense minister, has mocked this idea. So the idea of a defensive weapon is a bit vague. If I take this thing and throw it at someone's face, it's not a weapon. It's not a weapon, but it becomes an offensive weapon. And so that's a really good point. I mean, you can talk about S-300 missiles are air defense missiles, but they're being slammed into Kharkiv. So, where does he draw a line about defensive weapons? And of course, the defensive war, I've talked about this before, is a false distinction. Like, Ukraine need to be able to shoot into Russia to take out air bases in order to defend their own country. Right, that is defensive, but many people would say, well, that's offensive. No, you can't defend against planes that are dropping bombs and sending missiles into your nation without destroying those planes. How do you destroy those planes when they're on the airbase before they've taken off? Because when they're taken off, it's too late, right? Like if they're releasing these munitions from outside of your range, then what are you expected to do? Shoot down a guided glide bomb that's flying over the border? Well, you can't do that if it's hitting Kharkiv. So, which is just over the border. You don't have time to shoot that down. So the only way to stop this defensively, if you like, is by taking out the airbase. So there is no distinction with a country that's defending itself from an invasion of an aggressor. There is no distinction, in my opinion, between offensive and defensive. There is it's a false distinction, and we should stop it. But of course, that allows people like Jordan Bardella and others to say, "Hey, we're not going to support Ukraine, or we will support them, but only defensive weapons." It's just a way of stopping them getting a load of stuff that Ukraine desperately needs. Right. Russia is conducting state terrorism inside Germany, and the German chancellor does not give a damn. He spent his career appeasing and hugging Russia, so no wonder. This is pretty harsh against Olaf Scholz. But I've mentioned this over the last couple of days, but this was supposed to be after the Olaf Scholz bits. The idea that there are these arson attacks and he's not really dealing or talking about them enough. He's just afraid that the whole, I guess, I don't know, and maybe some Germans in the threads can maybe enlighten us a little bit as to where Scholz is at the moment with regard to Ukraine. But is he tampering down? Is he calming down a little bit on the rhetoric against Russia in order to try and appease those voters that he is losing possibly to the AfD? Could well be the case. Right. Okay. Oh, I did have that in the right place. I just forgot to do it. Right. So now Trentelenko here says, good on the US. We are doing some good sanctioning here. They're beginning to bite. So this is the idea that the Bank of China is going to stop processing payments in yuan from Russian banks to the US SDN list as of June the 24th. So the Bank of China is isolated from sanctions in the Russian Federation. Payments to China from large Russian banks will become more complicated. This is definitely useful. China have already changed some of their behaviors in payments concerning Russia, and this is the US Treasury having a good solid far reach and being able to affect how China supports Russia in the war. So that's good news there. We have India continuing to exploit the misery of others, says Tim White. Modi's government is importing more oil from Russia than ever before, even discounted the revenue earned keeps Putin's war effort going. Yeah, and this is what India and China are going to continue to do. Right? They're not so worried about the morality. They've got massive billion populations, and getting cheap oil is obviously an absolute boon for them. So they will. I mean, the one silver lining to this cloud is that Russia will get lower revenue than they would otherwise have got before the war started. China and India are going to be screwing Russia over for these prices. There's absolutely no doubt about that, but they are obviously going to be importing more and more. Now, yesterday I reported on this incident in Dagestan. It was actually bigger than was initially I initially reported. Military vehicles on the streets of Derbent. There were two areas, Makachkala and Derbent. Central part of the city is without power, without ongoing fighting and law enforcement preparing for an assault. In Makachkala, there is continuous shooting near a church. Indeed, there are reports that 40 hostages were held in the Orthodox Church. This is all finished now, but I don't think, I mean, a lot of people died, and most of them seem to be policemen. With armed individuals outside and gunfire nearby, in Derbent, firefighters were called back from a synagogue due to concerns about terrorists inside, with gunfire reported in the area. So the latest, I don't know from here, but Tim White said earlier that 17 police were shot dead, 37 were injured. 3 civilians died and 6 terrorists died. So 6 terrorists managed to take out 17 police. You had the National Guard were called in, and it was all very, very serious. But I know the Ukrainians were blamed, obviously, as you would expect, by the Russians initially. This was definitely I think, domestic issue there, possibly involving Islamic terrorism. Right, next are reports of 4 people. Oh no, that's for me for tomorrow. That's not supposed to be for today. Right, now we're going to go having talked about Jordan Bardella and issues with Olaf Scholz fighting off the AfD. And I know I've done this 2 days in a row. I'm pretty sure this is going to be the last day. But just this whole thing is still rumbling on about Nigel Farage, who is basically that same position of Jordan Bardella, but in the UK. Nigel Farage is Moscow's man. It's official. Now, what's fascinating here is you've got the Daily Mail, which is the most pro-Farage newspaper you can imagine, apart from Daily Express, actually. It goes to Daily Express, Daily Mail. Daily Mail is one of the biggest newspapers it's the biggest newspaper in the UK in terms of readership. The Mail Online was the most read online news source in the world. I don't know if it still is. So the Daily Mail has a big history of supporting, well, back in the 1930s, it supported Oswald Mosley and Nazism, but nowadays it supports Nigel Farage. So for this newspaper to come out and say this, I think it's really significant. So the Daily Mail said, now Putin's propagandists leap on Nigel Farage's claim that the West provoked the Russian invasion of Ukraine, as Kremlin attack dogs praise his complimentary remarks. So they were quite critical of Nigel Farage in a way that I would expect a decent news source to be. So I was pleased to see this in the Daily Mail. However, Nigel Farage then has come out and slagged off the Daily Mail, which is fascinating, right? So the Daily Mail, he says, this is him tweeting and gives a 5.5-minute diatribe. The Daily Mail is collaborating with the Kremlin to protect the dying Conservative Party. He's trying to twist it to say that actually the Daily Mail is protecting the Kremlin, whereas the Daily Mail was saying that he was there's this projection going on here. Then you've had people pointing out that, oh, he's wearing the same coat in that video where he's slagging off the Daily Mail that he wore at Baron Lebedev of Siberia's garden party in 2016. And that garden party, who do we have? We've got Lebedev and we have, Rupert Murdoch. And so we have Nigel Farage schmoozing with Russians and the Murdoch news empire there, and so much here written on this. And Lebedev required permission. So Lebedev was given permission by the Kremlin to use the Baron of Siberia title. He was given permission by Putin to do that, and there's a permission given. And so there are these Russian connections from with Nigel Farage here. Then I just want to go over this because this is absolutely fascinating. And I'm sorry if some of you are bored of me talking about Nigel Farage here, but Byline Times has written an absolute corker of a piece. And this was written, I think, just before Nigel Farage was interviewed by the BBC and gave that pro-Russian stuff, like anti-Ukraine, anti-NATO stuff. So this is written before that, bear in mind. So this is the 5 questions Nigel Farage has never asked about Brexit, Trump, and Russia. Okay, so question 1 here. Why did Farage lie about meeting the Russian ambassador? So we know that the former Russian ambassador to London, Alexander Yakovenko, was part of a strategic plan to disrupt Western alliances in the run-up to the invasion of eastern Ukraine and the illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014. This is good journalism, by the way. And this is what we want to know, which is how are people that are running for power connected to Russia and what is going on behind closed doors. So in the UK, Yakovenko tasked 2 spies to target Eurosceptics and Conservatives. Sergei Nalobin infiltrated the Conservative Party with the Conservative Friends of Russia organization, launched in the Russian embassy in 2012. Another official, Alexander Udod, targeted UKIP, which is when Nigel Farage was in charge of UKIP, and was introduced to Farage's confidant, Andy Wigmore, at its Doncaster convention in 2015. During this time, Farage regularly appeared on the state-controlled TV service RT, Russia Today. So we forget that Farage was an absolute common appearer on RT, Russia Today. He's a paid-up opinionator on RT, which is the propaganda service of Russia, which apparently paid him for his services and boosted every speech he made as an MEP in the European Parliament. It has also offered him his own TV show following the EU referendum. So Russia Today offers Nigel Farage a TV show, and we wonder why Nigel Farage is coming out and saying pro-Russian stuff at the moment. Join the freaking dots, peeps. Given these connections, why did Farage protest in June 2018 that, quote, "I've never met the Russian ambassador"? The Russian embassy website hosted a picture of Yakovenko greeting Farage in May 2013, the moment the Russian policy pivoted over to its plan to disrupt the EU before invading Ukraine. In 2019, Yakovenko was recalled to Moscow, awarded the prestigious Alexander Nevsky Medal by Putin, and appointed head of the diplomatic school. At a celebration dinner, Yakovenko is reported by a foreign diplomat present to have said, quote, "We have crushed the British to the ground. They are on their knees. They will not rise for a very long time." That is fascinating. And that would be in response to the Russians believing that and you may have really genuine reasons for voting to leave the EU and Brexit and whatnot, but we definitely know that Russia wanted us to leave. They want European disunity, and they were amplifying pro-Brexit narratives. So the second question, I won't go through all of the, we'll read the questions though. 2, how could Farage not have known about Aaron Banks's multiple visits to the Russian embassy during the Brexit campaign? So Aaron Banks, for those who don't know, is the bankroller behind the Leave.eu campaign, got into trouble for illegal funding as well. But the Brexit campaign was funded by Aaron Banks, and he has massive, or he supposedly has big connections to Russia, and indeed had multiple visits to the Russian embassy. Like, why would the leader of the Leave.eu campaign be meeting the Russian ambassador? 3, did Farage know of that Russian hacking of the Clinton campaign? So there are issues to do with the Clinton campaign hacking by the Russians, the DNC, etc., etc. Question 4, how could Farage be blind to Trump and Steve Bannon's backing for Russia? And of course, Farage was going to be campaigning for Trump in the election, in the US election, except he did a 180 switch and then came back to the UK to run in Clacton for the Reform Party. And then question 5, why did Farage hide the assessment that the Leave.eu campaign funder was an agent of Russian influence? So indeed, you've got Robert Mueller's report. Anyway, so on and so forth. The point is that Farage is someone that we should be very, very dubious of, with his connections to Russia, and we should be very wary of giving him any more power in this country than he already has. And Nick Cohen here says, this is such an important point. What's he talking about? Elliot Higgins, who is Bellingcat. So he is your open source intelligence guy, Elliot Higgins. I think it's a bit unfair to assume Nigel Farage is paid off by Putin. Some people just love corrupt, murderous authoritarians for who they are. And Nick Cohen, who's a journalist, says this is such an important point. Farage is likely to be driven by power worship and a desperate search for an authoritarian father figure. And you could argue that is a case with Trump as well. Was the issue of how much he was paid for RT appearances ever cleared up? The gap between Farage, between the figures Farage given by Farage himself and someone else for 2018 was huge, and neither figure apparently covered any previous year. So Farage claimed he wasn't paid that much by RT, and other people saying no, that can't be true. And so there's just so many questions to do with Farage's connections to Russia. Anyway, I leave it at that, because I know some of you are fans of Nigel Farage, and do you know what? You may have genuine issues with immigration, right? I'm not going to be some kind of pro-immigration liberal lefty here. But if you feel strongly about immigration, please vote Conservative and not Reform, is what I would say. Like, Conservatives are going to skew to the right in response to Reform anyway, and they have been doing that for months and months and months, well, years, I would argue. In fact, since David Cameron left, they've left behind the Tory wets, what we call the Tory wets, the moderate Tories, your Rory Stewarts and people like that have kind of been expunged from the party. They have drifted to the right. They are going to take on Reform, but they are at least still establishment enough in a good way to recognize that Russia are the bad guys here. Reform and Nigel Farage have some wingnut ideas. So you may be anti-immigration, fair enough, vote Conservative. Do not vote Reform. I don't want to be overtly pro-political party in my videos here, but I'm going to be pro-Ukraine. And I'm going to be pro-politically correct, as in right, as in have a moral rectitude here. And voting for Reform will give a platform to pro-Russian narratives. And and if there's nothing else that irritates me more, it is people parroting pro-Russian narratives who should know better. And the mind virus, the Kremlin mind virus that has infiltrated our political discourse. Sorry, that's a massive load of me ranting there, Matt.
That's fine. I just saw a comment about asking you if you'd seen the Johnson and Farage bun fight, and I was like, "What the hell's that?" But I can't find anything. So
I have seen, on Farage's own Twitter, and I hate to go and check Farage's Twitter. I don't know the story of this, but it's down here, and it's something to do with, I don't know if these are genuine, because I thought I saw these article titles, but with Farage in there instead of Johnson. But Boris Johnson blamed the EU for Russia's 2014 attacks on Ukraine and was branded a Putin apologist, and Boris blames the EU for war in Ukraine. but Boris Johnson's been one of the biggest supporters of Ukraine, and so I don't know what's behind this. That's from February 2022, that independent article. Who knows? But obviously, Farage is saying, "How dare you slag me off for being pro Kremlin when you were saying some of that rhetoric yourself way back when?" I presume that's what the argument is, but I haven't had time to look into it. I only have so much time in the day.
I was desperately looking for a video of them throwing, like, cream buns at each other or something. I was thinking it's Christmas.
But what's really interesting? So I live in a very pro-conservative, traditionally pro-conservative. I said this yesterday, but I'll repeat myself. I live in a very pro-conservative constituency. There's no point in me voting, even in a landslide victory where there is at least going to be a 20-point shift, something like that. The Conservatives will never not run this constituency or my next one along. But apparently, so I've seen some Vox Pots where people are like, I hate the Conservatives here. So even their Conservative supporters are saying, I hate the Conservatives. But they're saying it from a further to the right position. So where I'd say, I hate the Conservatives because I think we should have a stronger social welfare and we need to renationalize some of our utilities and stuff like this. Interestingly, what Reform are saying, strangely enough, but that's a whole other question. Although not on the welfare front. So where I'm saying it from a leftward position, people criticizing the Conservatives in my constituency are doing it from further to the right. So they're saying basically we need Reform more than we need Conservatives. So the Conservatives, there's a lot of hate for them, and Farage is tuning in on that here with what he's saying about Boris Johnson, but also causing a bit of a ruckus there, I would imagine.
There's actually quite a bit of frustration, like I feel whenever I'm talking UK politics, and it always seems like, especially over there in the last 10 years, the politicians seem to say anything and everything to get the vote, then not do anything about it. And then when you talk to anyone about it, they say, oh, well, all politicians are crooked. And it's like, no, you've been giving it to the Conservatives for the past 14 years. They're the ones that are crooked,
So it's a funny situation. Why Labour? It's just a quick sidebar for UK election at the moment. This is no value. I'm trying not to endorse anyone here, but just to explain.
Think that we're drinking down the pub and just
we're just having a chat, guys. So Labour are probably going to storm the election. The question is how much. Now, this might cause people to go, well, Labour are going to win, I'm not going to bother going out voting. But actually, that could happen for both. You might have Conservative voters saying there's no point, they've lost. But the Labour are worried that people think it's a fait accompli and aren't going to get out and vote. So that's an interesting dynamic. But generally, it's thought that they're going to win. So how much are they going to win by? So Labour, what they've done is they've adopted the centre ground, but really, really, really have. Like, they haven't just gone centre left. They've gone centre right they've gone so centre to the point that they are being called Tory light. So if you look at their policies,
like Biden in the US.
Yeah, their policies are very much aligned with what the Tories have they're going to continue some of the Tory things. Now, the question is, are they doing that from a strategic point of view? And I did say this the other day, or from another point of view, and it's kind of a bit of both in my opinion. So they've strategically said people win by going to the center. This is why I think Trump has made a mistake. He went further to the right, and he would have had much more chance of winning if he had gone to the center, because he would have taken those on the right with him, because they wouldn't have definitely voted for the Democrats, and he would have kept the center. But he's gone further to the right, and so he's going to lose the center to Biden, arguably. And so that makes it a much closer affair than it might have been. If Trump had gone to the center ground, Republicans would have won. Just absolute, in my opinion, would have happened. Anyway, in the UK, Labour have gone to the centre, and they've got a really insipid kind of policy platform, which is annoying a lot of people on the left, because they're like, you need to be way bolder than this. But apparently they are genuinely worried that there's actually no money left in the coffers. So they have an indication, apparently, that the Tories will be leaving the country devoid of any money. So if they say we're going to spend £10 billion on this great policy that might be really attractive, people might get excited by that to go and vote for Labour, then when they get in, they'll be held to that by their manifesto mandate, or by their manifesto, and they won't be able to fulfill that policy proclamation because there's just no money left. And so they are saying we aren't going to spend any money. And so it looks a bit like an austerity policy platform, which is I think problematic. But that's kind of that's explaining where they're positioning themselves and why.
So you can just borrow money.
Yes. So the other option is put up tax, but they're campaigning on not putting up taxes, or at least none of the main taxes.
You can go to the World Bank or whatever.
Yeah.
You can issue your bonds. You can raise money
Yeah.
in other ways. If you're creating jobs, you're getting a return from those
Yeah.
jobs. Usually, if you create 1,000 jobs, you're getting paid back that money straight away in taxes. You know,
So
and then the small businesses starting up, and it's just snowballs.
The problem is historically the left has been attacked for either tax and spend or for borrow and spend. And so they want to come in and not be criticized for doing what the left normally do, or at least what they're perceived to have done. Actually, when you look at so it's rather similar in the States here. When you look at the statistics of who looks after the economy better, actually Labour have got a better track record than the Conservatives, interestingly. And the same is the case for the Democrats against Republicans. The Republicans have got the reputation for being much better with the economy. But when you look at the last however many governments, the Democrats have come in, sorted things out, and then Republicans have taken over, have screwed things up, and Democrats have come in and sorted things out. And actually, when you look at the deficit and loads of metrics, that is borne out. So the perception is 180-degree switch from reality there. But anyway, I'm perhaps being a bit partisan, but I'm not being partisan because that's actually statistically borne out. There's one thing I wanted to the last bit of geopolitics here, and I know I've been talking for way too long, guys. Last bit of geopolitics may be significant. A fire's broken out at a lithium battery factory in South Korean city of Hwasong. It is reported that 20 workers were killed in the fire. This is a huge fire, right? Now, you can imagine that. Sorry, that's blowing my ears apart. You can imagine that lots of people are talking about how this could be connected. Lithium to the war, like either China or Russia, where you've got, Ukraine has lithium deposits, the largest in Europe. People are fighting over lithium because, economically fighting over lithium because it underwrites all of our electronics industries, right? And the batteries, electric cars, so on and so forth. To have a massive facility like this go up in flames gets people putting out conspiracy theories about whether this is sabotage or what. Or it's not. It's a perfectly plausible theory, to be perfectly frank. This could be connected to the war in some kind of distorted way due to it could be Chinese sabotage, and then you're thinking about Ukraine and lithium. And anyway, I just thought I'd throw that one in there as a bit of a curveball for people. Right, and that's pretty much that as far as the topics stimuli I had. Just want to give some thanks to some people as ever. So we talked about we sort of referenced Trump a couple of times, but Tucker Carlson is going to be going to Australia by all accounts to give a chat there. He is someone who spouts pro-Russian propaganda. His trip to Moscow was deeply problematic, I think, and he platformed Putin's narrative. And we've heard certain Republican supporters of people like Tucker Carlson regurgitating those points in public. And so this has found its home amongst the fertile ground of the MAGA Republicans. What's your thought on that kind of political thought in Australia? Because Australia does have a lot of people who would align with that.
Oh boy, I'm going to get beer cans thrown at me when I walk down the street tomorrow. We're a stupid population. We we really are. We worry about boats and illegal immigrants. Like I've said before, that's our biggest voting issue. And when you really think about it, these boats have traveled a couple of 100 kilometers. Surely they're the type of people we want here. Someone who's desperate to start again, and that they don't just get to sign on to the unemployment or anything. So there's that.
Yeah, so it's interesting because Nigel Farage has been advocating for an Australian style or people aligned within an Australian style thing where you can't claim welfare until you have been there for a certain amount of time and whatever and working.
Yeah, but and so the UK doing the Australian point system and all that as well. But
Yeah.
the Australian style point system doesn't allow those other workers that you need, because strangely enough, you're not going to find many Australians that are willing to clean a toilet or someone else's toilet. You need the migrant labor force to be able to do that. So we need both, and we've noticed it here that cleaners are actually getting. Hang on a sec, I'm going back about 8 years ago. The cleaners were on $60 an hour
Jeez.
because no one was cleaning. You
Well, yeah,
know,
it's supply and demand. That is your free market of labour there, and
yeah,
it's the same in the UK. We have an issue with agriculture, farm hands or farm produce picking. We've had issues with fruits rotting on the vines type thing because we can't get enough workers for that. It's just, yeah.
yeah. And so with Tucker coming to Australia, Louise said, I think that he's not, or his show was actually meant to be in Perth tonight, but it seems like it's been cancelled in Perth. But he's attached himself to a right-wing nut job called Clive Palmer, who isn't liked in WA. He actually took the West Australian government to court during COVID because WA had locked the border with the rest of Australia, and he actually took the West Australian government to court over it. So we have interesting politics.
Yes. And Graham Baker, this is
Yeah.
insanely kind of you. Look, mate, I'm going to be Australian here. Look,
Hang on,
Graham.
hang on. He's not Australian.
Well, he's in Australia, I
He's
presume.
in
So,
Australia. Yes,
I,
Fijian. So come on, speak Fijian.
oh, yeah, bro. Or no,
Oh,
that's
oh,
my
oh.
Kiwi Islander. That's my New Zealand Pacific Islander. Oh, yeah, bro. Oh, yeah, cuz it's really nice that you came by, mate. Really like that. That's my attempt at an islander. But Fiji, I should know Fiji. I've been to Fiji twice when I was backpacking,
Oh.
and I've got a picture. I've got a picture of me being rugby tackled by a woman on a beach, playing like rugby on a beach, and like it
Oh
was
boy.
like a bunch of backpackers. Most of them had never played rugby before, and they're like, okay, we'll give you a chance. You can play against our women, and they absolutely did us. And there's me just getting absolutely poleaxed by a woman on the beach, going, well, oh well, time for a beer. But anyway, where are we going? Graham, buy yourself a pint and then put the balance towards something to send to Ukraine. Now, this is a really good point, Graham. And thank you for this, by the way. It's insanely generous, as all of you have been incredibly generous. We are going to be starting a new NAFO truck fundraiser. So hopefully, as
NAFO,
a channel,
back
yeah,
there.
behind. So
Yeah.
your man Matt has been involved with NAFO an awful lot. We are going to hopefully raise. JR has been looking into this loads. We've done a lot of the initial sort of legwork. The question is just whether we're going to do it separately from, say, Greg and Professor Gerdes, or whether all go into one truck. And Rick, the Ukrainian, was talking to us the other day saying, actually, you guys should have no problem doing a truck yourself. So just do 3 separate trucks and that'd be brilliant. So we've got the excitement of getting patches up designed. You've got a couple of Rick the Ukrainian there up patches. So, we'll get a patch done and fundraise and get a truck to hopefully the unit of the guy who gave me that knife. And I'm still making my videos at the moment. I've been so busy, I've been unable to do that, but I've almost finished my next video. But there's a guy that gave me that knife who's just amazing. So I'd like to give the truck to his unit. But anyway,
Did you know my name's on most of the trucks that go?
how's that?
Well, the NAFO members.
Yeah.
They write the names of the lieutenants and generals and all that of NAFO on the side of the trucks. So you'll actually see us there on the truck.
Nice.
So,
Yeah, do 3 separate trucks, so we'll have separate patches. That would be amazing. That would be the intention. So JR's designed some patches, and also Chris, Clockwork Chris, who does my t-shirt designs, has also designed a bunch of patches that I actually need to get onto t-shirts and whatnot, and mugs. They look really good on mugs. Or we could just design a combination of them. But yeah, that's the exciting. Oh, everyone loves a patch. Everyone loves a patch.
yeah,
Sorry, Karen.
I was going to say Nikki said General Matt, but I do actually have a general patch, but I am a lieutenant. So, in NAFO. So, your recurring donations, get the different patches. So, yeah.
Brilliant.
Um,
Brilliant.
yeah.
I don't know if there's any questions that particularly came up during the probably very divisive chat that we were having. Oh, this is amazing. Benny Pie says, Jonathan, if you need a driver, I'll happily one over if you need a driver. Also have motor trade accounts with the UK auction houses, happy to help and contribute. That's
Wow.
amazingly generous. I think they all sort them out in Lithuania, is it? Or Vilnius? So I don't know the process, but thank you, Benny. I'll bear that in mind and feed that back
Yeah.
probably to JR.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It should be an ATP Geo rant patch. Because we all
That
love
is
your rants.
such a good point, mate. That's such a good point. I might have to fit rant. Yeah.
No. You have, €100, you get this patch. €200, you get the gold rant patch.
Cool, rant. So Chris has just reached out. Let me know if you need any more patch designs. Chris was amazing, and
Chris,
he got
gold rant patch.
he got quotes from patch designers, so they were really expensive. If you get a patch made up from scratch, actually, you have to buy a load of them in, and they're still like they cost bare minimum something like £5 each, and you have to buy like I don't know, an absolute ton of them, and so they are, or it might have even been more expensive than that. So they are not cheap. And I've just, do you know what? If I had more time, I never have enough time because I spend all the time talking to you guys and researching. But yes, anyway. And JR's in the zone. Check out. Shall I send you the other signs? It gets a bit in session, a bit background, back channel chat here. JR, Chris, I was going to put you today on the chat together with me to talk patches, exactly that. So you beat me to it, but that's exactly what I was going to do. So that will happen.
And I'd like to just go down on the record saying 6 months ago you should have been in contact with NAFO. I don't know if you remember that.
You did say that, yeah.
Yeah,
But it was all come. So
long time.
we had to. So just to let you guys know that Greg is imminently going to be going to Ukraine to help deliver the 4 medivacs that we have raised the money for. So that's what we do. It's not like we're like sticking our thumb up our asses and sitting around doing nothing. Like we raised an insane amount of money, and that has gone to these 4 medivacs that have also got anti-drone stuff on board, and etc. They are going to Ukraine, and the next will be NAFO, because I think it'd be really nice to get that done. Yes. So are there any questions out there? Anything else that we need to talk about? I want to do a video. I still have yet to do the video where I'm like talking about how Ukraine prevail in this war, what winning looks like, what's the most likely outcome for Ukraine. But that is something I'll talk about later.
Smithy doesn't have enough for the JP rant patch. I'll tell you what, I'll try and slip one by for you, Smithy, and just don't tell my wife.
Just and I do, by the way, and I've got a flag that I will be raffling as well. So there is a flag with some signed artwork on from the front line. So that will be raffled. I've been keeping that by for a long time now. But yes, so there you go.
A Womble patch.
That'll be. I bet that's John Larkin.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And now I'm singing the Wombles in my head. Thank you.
Well, no, he one of his favourite terms is one of my favourite terms, which is cockwomble. And that's where that comes from. So that's probably enough for the time being. I really appreciate everyone's support today. Thank you incredibly to the very kind generosity of, we'll say it again, Richard Bennett, Mitch Mazarol, Defo, Louise Foley, Joe Hales, Mark Bisque, Defo, Kevin Forst, and Graham Baker, Defo there. So amazing. I just want to say this. So Lloyd Miller says, Jonathan, I've messaged you several times. And again, I say thank you for the work you're doing. I want to give you my view of why Trump is anti-Ukraine. It's revenge for the first impeachment. I absolutely think Trump is driven by grudges, and he has a grudge against Zelensky because Zelensky refused to get dirt on Biden when he was being bribed with the javelins. So that is definitely something that happened, and by all accounts, according to sources, that is what is underwriting his position to some degree. He also, I think, sees Ukraine as part of. It sees Ukraine in a partisan way, so it's a Biden thing. And therefore, if Biden is supporting Ukraine, he's against Ukraine. He's also a fan of authoritarian leaders. We know that. He says he wants to be a dictator for a day. He talked about that love letter with Kim Jong-un. He supported Vladimir Putin over his own intelligence sources at the services at the Helsinki press conference, which I think was the worst point of his tenure. In my opinion, it was absolutely horrific. That he's shown a lot of respect for Xi Jinping, for Jair Bolsonaro, and for Viktor Orban, who he calls like the greatest leader in Europe, and etc. etc. All you need to do is go and look at everything that Trump has said about Ukraine to get an understanding of what his position is and why he believes it.
And Hillary's email scandal probably gave him the election in the first place.
So he asked Russia effectively to help out with that. So I know there are big fans of Trump out there who are listening, who are probably boiling over that I'm saying this, but this look at Trump's own language. Look at what he said. Like, don't shoot the messenger. He has said exactly what he intends to do, and Viktor Orban has said that aid will stop. He has said, he has implied that aid will stop as soon if he gets in charge, and so just go and look at the actual words. And then if that doesn't do enough for you, look at what his son has said consistently. Look at what people that he looks up to, like Elon Musk and David Sachs, have said. He then went on a podcast with David Sachs, and David Sachs is one of the biggest pro-Russian amplifiers out there and anti-Ukrainians. He went on a podcast and basically said all this stuff. It is perfectly clear. You've got his previous security advisor, John Bolton, saying that he will pull the US out of NATO, and he will do over Ukraine. You've got people in the know that knew him at the time. You've got his own words. You've got his family's words, and you've got his supporters like Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene, their words. It's very freaking clear where Trump sits on the Ukraine-Russia thing. If you really support Ukraine, and if that's as important to you as it is to me, then I think in the same way with Farage, like nothing else about their politics. I don't want to get into any of the other issues, but just on Russia-Ukraine, I would not vote for those two people. They're just not going to support Ukraine, and I think that's the beginning of the end for like the international political landscape that we know as we know it. Honestly, is that I think it's way more important than just supporting Ukraine as this kind of thing. Is connected in all the ways I try and show you on a daily basis to the global geopolitical state of affairs. That if we go down, if we allow Russia to prevail, then it's far bigger than just allowing Russia to prevail in a country over the other side of the world. It's far bigger than that. Yeah. Anyway, that's my tuppence halfpenny of opinion. Nothing you haven't heard before. Mate, what are your final words to the collected awesome team?
Thanks for putting up with us for almost 2 hours. Yeah, and chin up, everyone. That's it.
Yeah, I'll try and get out a mapping update later, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you to the great Matt. It's been a pleasure to speak to you, even though I did most of the banging on. I'm sorry about that. Sorry, not sorry.
No. I'll just get revenge when we eventually get to a pub.
Yeah. Good stuff. I'll buy the beers. Take care, everybody. Thanks so much for all the great supporters out there. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Ta-da.